A few weeks ago, I uploaded a short going through how I run my Tone King Imperial with my HX Stomp. And the audio of that wasn't very good, so I decided to go back and make a longer form video going over how I use this setup when I play with a country, southern rock, blues rock band. So basically for this band I have 3 tones. I have a Fender clean, I have a Marshall dirty, and then I have a Vox type tone. And I'm able to do all of this using the Tone King Imperial and the Line 6 HX Stomp. Now I'm running this in 4-cable method. So basically I have the Stomp running in the loop of the Tone King. That way, depending on how I want to run it, I can bypass the amps in the Imperial and then use the Sims in the Stomp. So I'll just kind of go through my tones and let you hear how they sound. So my first tone is a Fender clean tone. It's kind of on the edge of breakup, and I'm using the Tone King Imperial 112 cab. And that sounds like this. The second tone that I use is a Marshall type tone, and again I'm using the second channel of the Tone King, which can kind of go from a Tweed era Fender into a Marshall tone depending on where you have the mid-bite set and the volume, which kind of acts as the gain in these pedals. For this one I'm using the 412 cab IR in the Tone King Imperial for this tone. Now if I want a little bit more Marshall tone for that, I can just increase the mid-bite a little bit more. And then it gives it more of that mid-push that Marshall is known for. Now you can tell whenever you increase that mid-bite, you increase the gain as well. So if you want less gain, but you still want the mid-bite to be a little higher, you can just turn the volume down, and then it sounds like. But for me, I like to have the volume at about 1 o'clock, and then the mid-bite between 12 and 1. Sometimes it just depends on how much gain I feel that I need for that night and how the rest of the room sounds and how the band is sounding and things like that. And then the third tone is the Vox tone. Now this Vox tone utilizes the cab IR within the Tone King Imperial, but it's using the amp model inside the Helix. And I'm using a Vox AC30 amp model within the Helix. So to do this, I have to bypass the amp sim, so you can tell by the flashing light that I'm bypassing that amp sim. Now using the computer editor for the Tone King, you can select what IR is active when this is bypassed, and I have the 412 IR active when the amp is in, or when the pedal is in bypass. From there I go over to the HX Stomp, and on the Stomp I have this 2-button foot switch that acts as foot switch 4 and 5. So I activate foot switch 5, and that turns on the Vox. So then my tone is this. And it's kind of a dirty Vox sound, but you'll see why here in a little bit. So now I'll go through just hitting the pedals, playing some chords. I'll go from the Fender to the Marshall to the Vox, so you can see how they flow into each other. Now obviously the Marshall sound is a little bit louder than the other two, but generally that's used on songs that have a lot more drive, need more volume, and that sort of thing. So now if we go back to the Marshall sound, I can turn the guitar volume down. And it cleans up pretty well. So now the uses for this are pretty much, you know, the Fender for the country type tones. I'll use the Vox for whenever we do Whiskey Meyers songs, which we do quite a bit of those. And from what I've seen, Whiskey Meyers, one of their guitar players plays a Strat. It might have a humbucker, but he plays a Strat, and then he uses Vox amps as well. And I use their newest album as my guideline, and I feel like I can get that tone using the Vox model. The Fender tone obviously is geared towards more of the country stuff. Some of the country stuff we play maybe is a little harder edged, so for that I do use drives. And then we play Blackberry Smoke type Southern rock, and for that I use the Marshall tones. So I thought I'd go through, give song examples, and then give tonal examples as to why I chose the settings that I did. So the first clip I'm going to do is a Whiskey Meyers song. It's called Tailspin, but with this you hear a little bit of the chords, and then you'll hear some of the lead tone, and then I'll show you how I get those. All right, so for that song, to me, this Vox amp kind of is definitely in that ballpark, but I do need to add additional drives to get the same type of tone as what they use. So within the Stomp, I like to use the Kinky Boost, which is an EP booster model, and then I use the Minotaur, which is kind of like a Klon style overdrive. And so the bass tone is... Now if I add the Minotaur, it's a lot more overdriven. But it still retains that Vox chime on the top end. But I need just a little bit more drive for the lead sections of that song. So for that, I use the Kinky Boost, the EP booster model. One thing to remember with the Kinky Boost is it boosts everything, so it increases the low end and the mids quite a bit more than running it just with the Minotaur. But for that lead sound, I feel like this gets there for this song. And again, we'll go back and use the song as our guide. Moving on to the next tone, we will go to the Marshall tone. So for that, we will activate the second channel of the Tone King Imperial. I have the drives off for now, so again, that tone is this. Now, if I need to gain that up a little more, again, we'll go back to the Minotaur. And if I want even more gain on that for like leads, I'll add the Kinky Boost. Now my guide for this one was Waiting for the Thunder by Blackberry Smoke for this drive tone. So for that tone, obviously I'm going to go for a little bit more drive. So I'll add the Minotaur. I feel like that gets a good representation of that tone within the context that I use it. Now if we go to the solo section of that song, I'll show you how I use the EP boost for that. But one of the things that I hear when I hear their rhythm tone is a fuzzier tone that definitely sounds more vintage Marshall to me. I really have no idea what amps they use, but I feel like with this setup, it's easiest to achieve that kind of tone with the second channel of the Imperial. Now obviously I'm not Charlie Starr, so I'm not going to be able to play it like that. But here is the tone using the Kinky Boost, the Minotaur, and the second channel of the Imperial. So to me, that has the fuzzier edge that you hear in the tones of Waiting for the Thunder. Now moving on to the Fender tones, which basically comprise everything else that we do. We'll start with the bass tone. I'll actually start with the overdriven sound, and we use this for Chris Stapleton songs. I know that he uses older tweed Fenders, especially small Fenders, and I feel like we can get there with the Fender. We could probably actually use the second channel of the Imperial Preamp and take that mid bite and go counterclockwise if we wanted to, but then I would be fiddling with the knobs a little more than I would want to while we're playing on stage. So for this, I opt for the first channel of the Tone King Imperial. It's a Fender style clean, and then I'll use the Minotaur and the Kinky Boost on it, and then I'll ride the volume for whatever drive level that I need. So for this example, one of the songs we play is Arkansas by Chris Stapleton. So here's the intro. So for that tone, I turn the volume down a little bit. And then here's with the volume all the way up. I think with the volume all the way up, it gives it maybe too much edge, whereas turning it down a little bit gives it more of that fuzzy feeling. So that's how I get my tones for a Southern rock, blues rock, country rock band using only the Tone King Imperial and the Line 6 HX Stomp. I got the Tone King Imperial back in October, and I gotta say that as far as the new gear goes, this has kind of quieted the desire for a new Stadium XL or a Tone Master Pro or any of the others, because this does have tubes and it's got tube feel, and combining it with the Stomp is a whole lot of fun, and the footprint is pretty small. So if you don't need a whole lot of tones, if you don't need a whole lot of effects, this is a great setup. In a lot of ways, I feel like this gets me where I want to be for the blues rock, country rock, southern rock type sounds that we're going for in the group that I'm playing with. This hasn't completely replaced my Helix. I do have a Helix floor. I've got a Helix LT. Then I use the Stomp on occasion by itself. This hasn't completely replaced that for other types of sounds and other scenarios, but this is a whole lot of fun, and the feel is spot on to what you remember from a good tube amp, for those of you who have actually played them and are old enough to remember what it feels like to plug into an amp. This is a whole lot of fun. Thanks for watching.